Well, father and son were out running errands one Saturday morning, and as it approached lunchtime, they decided to go to their favorite restaurant for their favorite meal. And after they ordered their food and the servers delivered it, the father said to the son, "Why don't we have a silent prayer together?" So the father and the son, they bowed their heads and prayed in silence. So after a few moments, the father raised his head, and he was ready to eat, but he noticed that his son was still praying. So not wanting to be rude, the father waited for his son to stop praying, and he waited, and finally, after a long time, the young boy raised his head, picked up his fork, and began eating. Now, the father was just simply astonished that the son has such a long prayer. And he asked, "What were you praying about for so long?" And the son looked at his father and said, "How should I know? It was a silent prayer." So what we know by the story is Bartimaeus is not silent. He was articulate and apparently rather convincing because he got Jesus' attention. We know that he was regulated to begging at the fringes of the great city of Jericho. Bartimaeus figures out somehow that Jesus is close by, literally in shouting distance, and immediately begins to shout at Jesus. Now, part of him must have realized that this is his chance. And he's not about to let anything get in his way of encountering Jesus. Tenacious, persistent, demanding, obnoxious. Use whatever word you want, but it reminds us that what you bring in thought, word, and deed impacts the encounter. Bartimaeus needed to get Jesus' attention, and he does. Jesus literally stops, which means stand still, in a mob of moving people all about, and he asks that Bartimaeus comes close. And now here's just an interesting side note for maybe a trivia answer. Of the 37 or so miracles that Jesus performed, the gospel writers very rarely ever named the person who is healed. In fact, it happens only 2 times. Here, in the healing of Bartimaeus, and in the raising of Lazarus. So I spent enough time trying to wonder why Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, is named in this story. And I'm sure there is some explanation, but it would only be conjecture on my account. We just don't and won't know the answer. So that's one thing that we should notice. Another thing that we should notice is the details that Bartimaeus throws off his cloak before going to Jesus. Now, we know that a cloak is defined as a kind of external robe, wide and long, reaching to the ankles, but has no sleeves. It's the outer garment that serves as a blanket in the evenings. It was an essential part of clothing. We know in Deuteronomy and Exodus that a cloak was also used as collateral for a loan. That's how important. And after Bartimaeus is healed, he doesn't go back to pick up his most prized possession. He walks away from his all-important robe. Now, again, we can only speculate because we're not privy to the meaning behind what this action is. So don't want to deny that Bartimaeus is named, nor that he leaves his most prized possession behind. I'm just going to go let those oddities sit there without the need of explaining them away, because I can't. But also, more importantly, is because there's something significant going on. And what I'm aware of is that Jesus could have very easily dismissed, ignored, or walked right on by Bartimaeus, labeling him simply as another needing person pleading for his attention. In fact, I would say that Jesus did that very often, walked away from people. But this time he did not. And that seems very significant to me. He stops He pays attention, and he hears. And then he asks this poignant and direct question, what do you want me to do for you? And then it's amazing. He identifies a core value in Bartimaeus. He says, your faith has made you well. And how does the story conclude? Bartimaeus goes and follows Jesus. So there's a few insights I want to share with you this morning, beginning with Bartimaeus influencing the circumstance. He shouts out, he needs mercy. So how are you trying to get Christ's attention these days? Are you letting things get in your way of encountering Christ? That's the first insight. Each one of us has the responsibility to engage in encountering Christ. What the mind attends to continually, it believes. Now hear me, because I don't want a lot of shouting going on. Bartimaeus models the motivation, not necessarily the method. Persistent knocking or singing or praying or caring or doing or thinking or writing or drawing or reading or studying, whatever it takes you to get Christ's attention, keep on doing it. Because there'll be a moment, there'll come a moment when you will find yourself invited to come close to Christ. So be like Bartimaeus. Not always about Mike. But I also guess there's another side to the question. Who's shouting at you? Who needs your attention? Because as people of faith, we're called not to turn away from the shouts of a hurting and broken world, and we may feel like not listening. But we're called to the better way. And once we're there, it's not easy. You won't know what to do, or what will happen, or whether you'll do or say the right thing in the midst of whatever circumstance. But realize it's not so much about what you say or what you do. It's about where you are. Which leads me to the next insight. In the story, it indicates that Jesus paused, listened, and pays attention. So the insight is, it is about a ministry of presence, about pausing to notice those in need. Anyone can do this ministry of presence. It's not a special certification. It's not about having to be somebody or not. It's simply being who you are and deciding to intentionally care. It's about choosing to be with someone, to walk alongside. Sometimes, yeah, you can help them fix things. But sometimes there's no fixing things at all. You can't make things any better in their lives. But the best thing you can be is to offer yourself, your presence. It's their gift to you as much as it is your gift to them. So let me invite you to embrace the significance of the ministry of presence, your presence. Pause and notice a need. That's the second insight. Now, moving further into the story, I'm highly confident that Jesus was plenty aware of the situation and that he was smart enough to guess what Bartimaeus wanted to see again. He wanted to see again. I don't think Jesus was asking any kind of trick question here. He simply says, what do you want me to do for you? And let's read it simply at face value. Bartimaeus wanted to see again. And he believes Jesus can make that happen. Someone once wrote, Bartimaeus is given what he asked for, not because he wants a perfect life. He's healed because he is able to see what he needs, the healing that Christ brings. And in this case, he wants what he needs. So what do you need from Jesus today? What do you want from Jesus? And are they the same questions, or how are they different questions? What do you need? And will your faith make you well? Is that core belief in your being what Jesus will notice in your life? I read every one of us is in need of Jesus doing something in our lives, like Bartimaeus, maybe a physical healing for ourselves or a loved one. We all know pain, sorrow, and fear caused by physical diseases, cancer, heart problems, diabetes, dementia, and more. Or maybe some other kind of healing, a healing of dis-ease in our hearts or our souls, and emotional or spiritual brokenness we feel within. Could be the need for the healing of a broken relationship, or a broken heart, or a broken dream, or a broken spirit, and we may be feeling the dis-ease of worry or anxiety over a child or grandchildren, a future, a job. Whatever the burden is of our dis-ease and disease, it weighs heavy on us. Bartimaeus' healing seems to be directly linked to his faith, and that makes things a bit uncomfortable for us, for those of us who are praying for a healing. For those of us who are praying for Christ to have mercy on us. So what kind of faith does it take to be healed? Now we know that there is strong scientific evidence that individuals who regularly practice in spiritual worship services or related activities, and who have a strong sense of the presence of a higher being, are healthier and possess greater capacities for healing. Faith is a benefit to healing and health. So what I'm going to say to you is that on a certain level, your faith matters when it comes to healing. I'm also going to tell you that your faith makes all things possible. And that may be difficult, particularly if you're dealing with a major health issue or a complicated problem, but your faith is enough. That's what faith's about. The assurance of things hoped for. So do not doubt that your faith is not enough. Rather, express it, affirm it, and live it. And maybe that's the whole reason for this story about Bartimaeus, to remind us to express our faith, to affirm your faith. And as the story ends with Bartimaeus following Jesus, to live your faith.